Do you have an unhealthy obsession with the East? Do you want to do so much damage that dancer mains swoon at the mere thought of you joining their party? Do you want to be the reason that Black Mage keeps getting buffed just to keep up with you? Then Samurai might be the job for you. Hello, my name is Julia, and in this video I'll be explaining the abilities, opener, rotation, utility and mitigation of the Samurai job at level 90. But before we do that, I'd like to point out that only 2% of you guys are actually subscribed. So if you find my videos entertaining or educational, then please consider subscribing, as it helps out the channel a lot. A raid party in Final Fantasy consists of 2 tanks, 2 healers and 4 DPS. The DPS are subdivided into melee, ranged and casters. A party wants 1 of each and 2 of any. Samurai fills one of the melee DPS spots. The katana wielding DPS revolves around building different resources called Sen, and by combining different Sen, Samurai are able to charge up powerful melee attacks that deal heaps of damage. Samurai's job gauge is straightforward. The first part is your Kenki gauge. This gauge fills up gradually up to 100. It does so in increments of 5, 10 and 15 by using certain abilities. Kenki can be spent on short cooldown Hisatsu OGCD abilities. The second part is your Sen. These 3 symbols show whether or not you currently possess the corresponding Sen. Each can be generated by using a different 1-2 or 1-2-3 combo that can then be spent on powerful Iyatsu attacks, which we will cover later. Lastly, we have 3 small diamonds at the bottom, which indicate your meditation charges. When all 3 are filled, you can spend them on a hard-hitting OGCD ability. Samurai has a lot of different melee attacks and abilities. Let's go through all of them. Like mentioned before, Samurai's kit revolves around 3 combos that generate different Sen. These 3 all start with Hakaze, a low potency GCD that generates 5 Kenki. The first combo we'll cover is the Yukikaze combo. This is a simple 1-2 combo and ends after using both Akazu and Yukikaze. Yukikaze deals a moderate amount of potency, increases our Kenki by 15 and grants us the green Sen called Setsu. The second combo we'll talk about is Jinpu. This attack deals a moderate amount of potency, generates 5 Kenki and grants us a buff called Fugetsu, which increases our damage dealt by 13% for 40 seconds. Jinpu further combos into Gecko. This is an attack that deals increased damage if hit into the target's rear. It also generates 10 Kenki and grants us the blue Sen called Getsu. The last combo also starts with Hakaze, but goes into Shivu. This attack grants us 5 Kenki and grants us a buff called Fuka, which reduces our weapon skill cast and recast time, our spell cast and recast time, and our auto attack delay by 13% for 40 seconds. It then further combos into Kasha, which deals increased damage if it hits the target in its flanks or side. Kasha also generates 10 Kenki and grants us the red Sen called Ka. Let's talk about what we do with these Sen. In our spellbook we have an action called Iyatsu. This attack changes into 3 different attacks based on our current number of Sen. All of these attacks require you to charge them up as they are powerful, thus they all have a cast time. It's worth noting that at the end of this cast there is room for 1 OGCD weave. These attacks also have increased range and can still be cast slightly out of melee range. The attacks are as follows. If you have 1 of any Sen, it turns into Higanbana, which after a short cast applies a potent bleed to the target for 60 seconds. It also grants 1 charge of meditation upon use. If we have any combination of the 2 Sen, it turns into Tenka Gokun. This is your AoE Sen attack. After a short cast, it deals a moderately high potency to all nearby enemies and also grants 1 stack of meditation. If we have all 3 Sen, it turns into Madare Setsukuka, a very hard-hitting single target attack that always critically strikes. It also grants us 1 stack of meditation. The Samurai rotation revolves around maintaining the bleed from Higanbana while gaining as many Madare casts as possible. This was the core of the rotation. Let's go over some other actions and abilities which help fill out the rotation. NP deals a low potency damage from afar. Use this if you're ever forced out of melee range to maintain GCD uptime. It also generates 10 Kenki. Tsubame Geishi repeats the last used Sen attack. This can only be used on the GCD directly after said Sen attack. Combo this with Madara casts in single target and Tenka in AoE scenarios. There never is a scenario where you would use this to repeat Higanbana. Try to keep this attack for burst windows without overcapping charges. Third Eye places a buff on you for 4 seconds, which reduces the incoming damage from the next attack by 10%. When hit by said attack, it also generates 10 Kenki, and since this ability has a short cooldown of 15 seconds, it should be used as frequently as possible to get the maximum amount of Kenki. Maiko Shiju grants us a buff with 3 charges. Each can be spent on any combo GCD to use the combo without the prerequisite combo GCDs. This allows us to gain any Sen with 1 GCD instead of 2 or 3. Kenki can be spent on different Hisatsu abilities. Sanai deals a large amount of damage to a single target. It costs 25 Kenki to use and has a cooldown of 120 seconds. Keep this on cooldown at all times. Shinten also costs 25 Kenki and does a moderate amount of damage to a single target. Use this to prevent your Kenki gauge from overcapping. Gyotun is a gap closer and allows you to rush towards the target, dealing a moderate amount of damage at the cost of 10 Kenki. This ability also has a 10-second cooldown. Yaten is the exact opposite and backstabs you for 10 yalms. It also deals a moderate amount of potency and costs 10 Kenki to use. After using it, it grants us enhanced NP, which makes our next NP cast deal increased damage. These 3 Hisatsu all deal the same relative damage. 10 Kenki for 100 potency and 25 Kenki for 250 potency. Do not feel afraid to use the movement Hisatsu as they're damage neutral at worst and can gain you damage by increasing your uptime. Lastly, Kyuten is the AoE version of Shinten. Use this from 3 targets onwards. Gurin is a line AoE version of Sanai. Use this from 2 targets onwards. Then we have Meditate. This ability can be used during downtime, when you cannot attack the boss. It gradually grants us Kenki and meditation charges over its duration. The ability is a channel, and thus, if you move, it will be cancelled. Try prioritizing using this during downtime where you do not have to move. Hagakure converts all of your current Sen into Kenki at the rate of 10 Kenki per Sen. We use this for a concept called filling, which we'll explain later. Iki Shotun is an OGCD that instantly grants us 50 Kenki and also the buff Ogi Namikiri Ready. When we have said buff, we can use the GCD Ogi Namikiri, which has a cast time like our Sen abilities. Ogi deals a large chunk of damage in a cleave in front of you. The damage is guaranteed to critically strike. After using Ogi, the button turns into Keishi Namikiri, which is an instant cast version of Ogi that can only be used directly after Ogi. Be sure to press it. Now let's talk about our meditation spenders. Once you have gained 3 charges of meditation, you can use them on the OGCD Shoha. This OGCD ability consumes all 3 charges and deals a hefty hit in return. Showa 2 is the AoE version of Showa. Use this when there are 3 targets or more. Talking about AoE, Fuga or Fuka at level 86 onwards is the AoE version of Hakaze. It combos into Mangetsu or Oka, which gives you the blue and red Sen respectively. Samurai's rotation can be planned into the GCD as there is no RNG. This means that your rotation will generally be different for each encounter you face. I do consider this concept as fairly advanced though, so I will only cover the basics in this video. The first thing we naturally need to do is our opener. This opener can generally be used for most encounters without worry. For those looking to optimize, there are variations for various fights. The opener starts by using Meiko 9 seconds before the pull, and then we use True North 5 seconds before the pull. Feel free to delay these two slightly if it takes a second to get to the boss. It might also be recommended to use Sprint to get into meta range faster if you have no physical range using the rate-wide movement buff. Open with Gecko. If using a tincture on pull, drink it here. Use Kasha second and weave in Iki Shotun. Next, use Yukikaze. Cast Midare and weave in Senai. Double up Midare with Tsubame Keishi's Midare. Weave in your second Maikyo and use another Gecko, weaving in a Shinten. Use your single Sen and cast Hikanbana and weave in another Shinten. Cast your Ogi next and weave in Shoha. Cast Ogi's combo, the Kaishi Namikiri. Use Kasha and weave in Shinten. Then use Gecko and weave in Gyotun. Use Hakaze and Yukikaze, weave in another Shinten, and finish off the opener by casting Midare, which you then also double up with Tsumbame. The opener might seem scary at first, but give it a few tries on a training dummy in any housing district and try to understand why we use our actions the way we do it, and it should become second nature relatively quickly. Here's an example of the opener being done. After the opener, it is our goal to minimize wasting our Sen and Genki by using the correlating abilities before generating new resources or overcapping them. We also want to try to bring as much burst damage into the buff windows of our party each 2 minutes. You can recognize when the next 2-minute buff window is by looking at your Iki Shoten cooldown, as this is also 2 minutes long. This means that if your Iki Shoten is almost coming off cooldown, you're about to enter your burst phase. To also make this easier, try to keep your abilities on cooldown so that they line up perfectly with the burst windows, as their cooldowns naturally do so after the opener. Lastly, try maintaining your Hikanbana bleed at all times, which leads us into the concept of filling or stalling. You want to refresh your bleed as close to its fall off range as possible without it actually falling off. This means, depending on your skill speed, we can have 2 or 3 cents around the time we need to reapply Hikanbana, locking us out from the ability. This also goes for entering our even minute burst window clean with a Midare cast. To combat this, we can make use of Hagankure. If you need fill for 1 GCD, use Yaten and NP. It is ideal to cast Yaten from the center of the pass to prevent possibly losing an auto attack. If you need to fill for 2 GCDs, use Hakaze and Yukikaze before weaving in Hagakure. If you need to fill for 3 GCDs, use Hakakuze, Jinpu and Gecko, or Hakakuze, Shivu and Kasha. Weave in Hagakure after either. Choose between the two based on which positional you currently have access to, the rear or the flank. If you have to fill in for 4 GCDs, use Hakaze and Yukikaze twice in a row and weave in Hagakure after each Yukikaze. The concept of filling is probably the most complex thing for beginners to understand and do. Do not worry if you fail to do it. It takes practice and time. Just keep at it and you'll be a master at it soon. What might help is this cheat sheet regarding filling. At a recast time of 2.14 seconds, you will have to fill 2 GCDs every odd minute and none every even minute. At the recast time of 2.07 seconds, you will have to fill 3 GCDs every odd minute and 1 every even minute. And at a recast time of 2 seconds, you will have to fill 4 GCDs every odd minute and 2 every even minute. If you do not have these GCD tiers, then it is your first priority to melt to achieve them. All GCD times listed on these cheat sheets are assuming you are under the effect of Shivu. Samurai, like all other jobs, have some form of utility and mitigation that they bring to raid. We already talked about Third Eye, as it's a DPS increase to use, but let's talk about the rest as well. Second Wind heals you for a large amount. Leg Sweep stuns a single target. Keep in mind that not all targets, like bosses, are stunnable, so outside of content like Palace of the Dead, this ability doesn't actually see much use. Bloodbath grants us a buff for 20 seconds, which heals us for a moderate amount each time we deal physical damage. Feint lowers the target's physical damage dealt by 10% and magical damage dealt by 5% for 10 seconds. Use this frequently to help mitigate raid wights and tank busters. Keep in mind though, that all melees have access to Feint, and multiple uses at the same time do override each other. Arm's Length is our knockback immunity. It also slows the attack speed of any enemy that attacks us while it is active. Lastly, True North allows us to ignore any positionals on Gecko and Kasha for 10 seconds, having them deal increased damage regardless of your position. Thank you for watching the full video. Remember to subscribe if you enjoyed the video or found it helpful. And a special thanks to Zombie, Zala Kutka, and Boxer for fact checking and providing footage for this guide.